There is a question we never thought to ask about Skinwalker Ranch. For nearly 3 decades, every camera, every sensor, every late-night patrol has pointed outward, across the land, or downward, into the soil and the strange cavities beneath it. The fences have been walked. The pastures have been measured. The barns and the bunkers and the buried structures have all, at some point, felt the weight of human attention. But the sky above the ranch has remained, in a strange and almost deliberate way, untouched, treated as empty. Treated as background. As though whatever has been happening here has only ever been a story of the ground. This is The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, Season 7, Episode 8, Rocket Men. And what you are about to witness is the moment that assumption was finally tested. It begins, as so much of this investigation does, with a quiet conversation around the table inside the command center. The kind of conversation that doesn't announce itself as significant until much later, when its implications become impossible to ignore. Someone glances upward, almost absent-mindedly, and asks a question that should have been asked years ago. What if the answers were never in the ground at all? What if they have been passing overhead the entire time, unmeasured, unrecorded, dismissed, simply because no one had ever built the tools to look? It is a small moment, a single sentence, but it is the kind of sentence that reframes everything that follows. The history of this place has always been a history of boundaries. The triangle itself, the strange geometric region where so much of the ranch's most persistent activity has been recorded, was defined by what investigators could observe at eye level, by patterns traced across pastures and along fence lines. The team mapped magnetic anomalies in the soil. They tracked strange lights skimming low over the mesa. They followed tunnels that seemed to defy ordinary geology. And in nearly every case, the instinct was the same. Look closer to the earth. Dig deeper. Search harder where the boots can walk and the hands can touch. But anomalies have a way of resisting the boundaries we draw around them. And on Skinwalker Ranch, the boundaries have always been more porous than anyone wanted to admit. The decision to look upward did not arrive as a sudden revelation. It arrived the way most real discoveries do, slowly, built from years of small inconsistencies that no one had connected until now. Radar returns that flickered at altitudes far above anything the team had previously cataloged. Witness reports, some decades old, describing lights that did not behave like aircraft, moving with a precision and silence that defied easy explanation. Sensor readings that spiked not at ground level, but somewhere far above it, in a layer of atmosphere the ranch had simply never had the means to study. For years, these fragments sat in files, treated as side notes to the main investigation. But fragments accumulate, and eventually, they begin to form a shape. That shape, this season, became a plan. Not a stunt, not a spectacle for the cameras. A genuine scientific undertaking, built around a tool the team had never deployed before. Specialized rockets, instrumented to climb far beyond the reach of any drone or balloon previously used on the property. Designed to carry sensors into a region of sky that had, until now, been a blind spot in nearly 30 years of investigation. The engineering brought onto the ranch for this purpose was unlike anything seen in previous seasons. These were not simple bottle rockets or modified weather balloons. They were precision instruments, built in partnership with aerospace specialists who understood atmospheric science at a level the team's usual investigators did not. Each rocket would carry a payload of sensors calibrated to detect electromagnetic disturbances, atmospheric pressure changes, and trajectory deviations. Things that, if present, might explain decades of inexplicable sightings in the skies above the basin. The The specialists who arrived on site carried with them a kind of careful, measured skepticism that the team had come to respect. They were not believers looking for confirmation. They were scientists looking for data, and they made it clear, in the quiet, professional way that seasoned researchers do, that whatever the rockets found would have to withstand scrutiny. There would be no shortcuts here, no interpretations stretched to fit a preferred narrative. If something strange was happening above the triangle, it would have to prove itself through instruments, not impressions. There was a tension in the air during those preparation days that felt different from previous investigations. It wasn't the tension of walking into a dark tunnel or approaching a structure that might collapse. It was a quieter, more cerebral unease, the kind that comes from realizing you are about to test an assumption you have built an entire body of work around. If the sky above the ranch was truly empty, truly unremarkable, the rockets would confirm it, and the team would simply have closed off one more avenue of inquiry. But if it wasn't empty, if something really was up there, the implications would be enormous, reaching far beyond anything previously documented at ground level. The morning of the first launch arrived with the kind of stillness that the ranch seems to produce on cue, almost as if the land itself understood the significance of what was about to happen. The sky was clear, pale with early light, and the wind, for once, was calm enough to proceed without delay. The team gathered at a safe distance from the launch site, instruments armed, cameras rolling, voices low. There is a particular kind of silence that settles over a group of people in the moments before something irreversible happens. No one spoke unnecessarily. Checklists were read in clipped, efficient tones. The specialists moved with the practiced calm of people who had done this before, though even they seemed to sense that this launch carried a different weight than the technical exercises they were accustomed to. When the rocket finally lifted off, it did so without spectacle, a controlled, steady climb into the morning sky, trailing a thin line of vapor that thinned and dispersed as it rose. Within moments, it had shrunk to a point of light, then to nothing the eye could track at all, leaving only the data feeds to tell the team what was happening far above their heads. What followed was a waiting period that, for all the technical precision involved, felt almost unbearably human. The team clustered around monitors, watching numbers scroll past, the kind of numbers that meant little to anyone outside the specialist team, but carried, in their steady progression, the promise of an answer. Telemetry confirmed altitude, confirmed trajectory, confirmed that the sensors were functioning as designed. And then, briefly, something flickered. It was small, a momentary dropout in the data stream, the kind of glitch that, under ordinary circumstances, might be dismissed as a transmission hiccup, nothing more than the routine imperfection of complex electronics operating at extreme altitude. The specialists frowned at their screens, conferred quietly, reset a connection. Within moments, the data resumed its steady flow, and the team allowed themselves to exhale. But something about that flicker lingered. It was the kind of moment that, on its own, meant nothing. And yet, in a place like this, even nothing has learned to feel like something. It wasn't until the full data set had been retrieved and processed, hours later, back inside the analysis room, that the team understood what they were actually looking at. And what they found was not the clean, unremarkable baseline anyone had quietly hoped for. Buried within the readings was a signature that should not have existed, an electromagnetic pattern, faint but unmistakable, appearing at an altitude band the rocket had passed through on its ascent. A band far above anything the ranch's ground-based instruments had ever been capable of monitoring. It was not random noise. It had structure, a rhythm to it, subtle but consistent, the kind of pattern that instruments are far more likely to detect from something deliberate than from something incidental. The first instinct, as it always is in careful investigation, was to assume error, equipment malfunction, sensor calibration drift, interference from some mundane source, a passing aircraft, a satellite, atmospheric static that simply mimicked structure without actually possessing it. The specialists ran their checks, cross-referenced the readings against known sources of interference, examined the rocket's own systems for any sign of fault. Nothing explained it. There was a particular look that crossed the lead specialist's face in that moment. A look the team had come to recognize over the years. The look of a trained skeptic confronting something they cannot immediately dismiss. It is not excitement, not exactly. It is something more careful than that, a kind of professional unease, the quiet recognition that the easy explanations have run out. If this was not equipment error, then something at that altitude, in that specific region of sky, directly above the triangle, was producing a measurable, structured signal. And no one in that room could say, with any confidence, what that something was. The question that followed was not whether the anomaly was real. The data made that difficult to dispute. The question was whether it meant anything beyond itself, whether this strange signature in the upper atmosphere had any connection at all to the decades of phenomena the team had documented on the ground below it. This is where the investigation took its most unsettling turn, because the moment the team began laying the new data alongside their existing archives, the connections did not feel forced. They felt uncomfortably natural. The altitude at which the anomaly appeared correlated, almost precisely, with reports stretching back years. Accounts of lights that witnesses described as appearing impossibly high before descending with a speed and silence that defied conventional aircraft behavior. The structured rhythm in the electromagnetic signature echoed, in subtle ways, the patterns recorded by ground sensors during some of the ranch's most documented magnetic disturbances, the kind that had previously been attributed to subsurface activity, to mineral deposits, to forces believed to originate from beneath the land rather than above it. For years, the working theory had been that whatever was happening at Skinwalker Ranch was, in some sense, rooted in the ground itself, in ancient geology, in buried structures, in something embedded in the earth beneath the triangle. But here, suddenly, was the suggestion of a second source, one that did not originate below the surface at all, but high above it, in a region of sky the team had simply never had the instruments to examine. Not everyone in the room was ready to accept the implications so quickly. There were voices, careful and reasoned, urging caution, reminding the team that one anomaly, however striking, was not proof of a unified phenomenon. Correlation was not causation. A single data set, however compelling, could not rewrite years of established theory. It was the kind of disagreement that, in a lesser investigation, might have felt like conflict. Here, it felt like rigor, the necessary friction of serious minds, refusing to let excitement outrun evidence. But even the most cautious among them agreed on one thing. The only way to know if this was real, if this pattern was not a singular event, but a consistent feature of that altitude, was to go back up and look again. The second launch carried a different kind of weight than the first. This was no longer a baseline test, no longer an exercise in establishing whether the upper atmosphere held anything worth investigating. This was a deliberate attempt to confirm or disprove something the team had already glimpsed, and everyone involved understood the stakes had changed. The rocket's payload was adjusted, sensors recalibrated to focus specifically on the altitude band where the first anomaly had appeared. Additional instruments added to capture a wider range of data should the signature reappear. The preparation was more deliberate this time, more focused, the casual conversation of the first launch replaced by a quiet, almost reverent concentration. When the second rocket lifted off, the team watched in a silence that felt different from before, heavier, charged with an anticipation that no one quite voiced aloud. There is a particular discipline required to wait for data without projecting onto it, to avoid letting hope shape interpretation before the numbers have had their say. The team did their best to maintain that discipline. But as the telemetry began streaming back, climbing toward the critical altitude, it was clear that no one in that room was entirely successful at staying neutral. And then, as the rocket passed through the same band of atmosphere, the signature returned. This time, there was no ambiguity, no flicker to second guess, no isolated glitch that could be explained away by routine interference. The pattern reappeared with the same structured rhythm, the same faint but unmistakable signature, present again at nearly the identical altitude as before. Two separate launches, two separate ascents into the sky above the triangle, and twice now, the same unexplained presence had made itself known. The reaction in the room was not the kind of triumphant celebration that might be imagined from the outside. It was quieter than that, more careful. The reaction of people who understood that they had just crossed a threshold they could not easily walk back from. A pattern observed once might be coincidence. A pattern confirmed twice begins to look like something else entirely. Something consistent. Something, perhaps, deliberate. What the team now held was no longer a curious anomaly. It was evidence of a recurring phenomenon, occupying a specific, measurable region of sky directly above the ranch's most active ground locations. A phenomenon whose structure echoed patterns the team had spent years trying to understand at ground level. The implications stretched the boundaries of everything the investigation had previously assumed about the nature and scale of the triangle. If this signature was connected, even partially, to the strange lights, the magnetic disturbances, the unexplained energy readings that had defined so much of the ranch's documented history, then the mystery was not confined to the land at all. It extended upward, into airspace the team had never thought to measure, suggesting a phenomenon with a vertical dimension no one had previously considered. The triangle, it seemed, might not be a shape drawn across pastures and fence lines. It might be a column, reaching from somewhere beneath the earth to somewhere far above it, with the ranch itself sitting at its base. It is a sobering thought, and the team, to their credit, did not let it run ahead of the evidence. Even amid the quiet weight of confirmation, there remained a careful insistence on what this discovery did not prove. The data revealed a structured electromagnetic signature at a specific altitude, recorded twice, under controlled conditions. It did not reveal the source of that signature. It did not explain what was generating it, whether the phenomenon was natural, technological, or something that defied easy categorization altogether. It did not confirm, with certainty, that the upper atmosphere anomaly and the ground-level phenomena shared a single origin, only that their patterns aligned in ways too consistent to dismiss as coincidence. There was a particular moment, late in that long day of analysis, when one of the longtime investigators sat back from the monitors and admitted, quietly, that this discovery had changed something in how they understood the ranch. For years, the work here had felt like digging, like searching downward into soil and stone for explanations buried in the earth. Now, For the first time, there was a sense that the answers might also be found by looking up, that the mystery had a dimension the team had simply never thought to measure. It is a humbling kind of realization, the sort that comes not from a dramatic revelation, but from the slow recognition that an entire framework of investigation may have been incomplete from the start. Not wrong, necessarily, just unfinished, missing a layer no one had thought to examine until rockets, of all things, opened a door that had been sitting unlocked above their heads the entire time. As the day drew to a close, the team did not gather to celebrate a discovery solved. They gathered, instead, around a quieter understanding, the recognition that they had found a thread worth pulling, not an answer worth closing the book on. The data from those 2 launches would need to be studied further, compared against historical records, examined by additional specialists who had not yet weighed in. More launches, almost certainly, would follow in seasons to come, each one probing a little further into that strange, structured signal sitting somewhere above the triangle. What remains, as this investigation closes for now, is not a solution but a recalibration. The mystery of Skinwalker Ranch has always resisted easy boundaries, refusing to stay contained within fence lines or beneath soil, expanding instead in directions no one quite expects. This season, that expansion went upward, into a sky long assumed to be empty, and what the team found there suggests that the true scale of whatever is happening on this land may be larger and stranger than even decades of investigation had prepared them to believe. Perhaps that has always been the quiet lesson of this place, that the answers are rarely where we expect them to be. That every boundary drawn around this mystery, every assumption about where to look and where not to, has eventually proven too small to contain what is actually happening here. The rockets have come back down. The data has been logged. But somewhere above the triangle, in a layer of sky no one had measured until now, something is still there, waiting, perhaps, for the next launch, the next question, the next team willing to look up instead of down.